Okay, so we are talking about creativity and structure.
Okay.
Are they like salt and not salt, oil and water, or do they go well together? Um, and I don't know. Let's just jump in.
Yeah. Well, so the first thing that comes to my mind about that is one of the energy healing modalities that I was learning, matrix energetics. That one of the things that the guy was saying, he was quoting Jackie Chan, I think, right? The martial art movie
Yeah.
guy, and where one of the tenets was no way as way, right? So the way you do it is by not having a way, no dogma, no whatever, but that's its own way, right? Because then, if you start noticing, well, you have to keep removing it. So I think, all right, well, if you notice that you're doing something repetitive, well, that's a way then, and you have to be no way. You have to not do that. But if you do that, then you're following a way of the way of don't repeat yourself, or
Yeah.
It's just so convoluted. To me, I guess how I tend to operate more is not no way as way, but like what flows in or what I flow into. I mean, when I'm at my best, my most creative, I'm just flowing. And, maybe I bump into this, and so I react with it. And then somebody shows up and I react with that, or something catches my eye and I go over there. And not really structured at all, except for not having a structure.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting is that's the way I do my daily walks, is that I try to, and I think I'm generally pretty consistent about it. Consistent about being inconsistent in the paths that I go on when I go on my walks, because I want to see different parts of town and I don't want to get into this routine. And so, I'm going for this no way by having this consistent way of going for a no way. And it's just interesting how different things show up.
So what popped up for me was a book series that I wrote in my mind. Never really did any one of the series, but it's a children's book series called Master Only Don't Know.
Oh.
And the first one in the series was called The Table and Master Only Don't Know. And it was about how the table, that is something that we sit at and eat off of, was made, what contains lots of energy that we don't ever think of, like the people who chopped down the tree and hewn the wood and made the food that goes on the table, and who you sit around the table with, and all that energy is contained within an object. So I don't know why, but my mind went there with Master Only Don't Know, is like how important for me structure and discipline is in my life to allow me to have the freedom of letting the intuition speak to me or things come in, particularly, with my food addiction. Like I eat literally weighed and measured meals every day, and I don't eat anything in between those meals.
Wow.
That's like an incredibly intense structure, but it gives me all this freedom because my mind isn't caught up with should I, shouldn't I, what if I, It's just a plan, and it gives me this springboard for the rest of my day.
It almost reminds me of like a battery. Someone was just talking about, well, for one thing, the energy in the table, but the idea that structure can be like a container that holds this energy rather than, oppressing it by containing it. It's like holding it until you need it. And that's what the table reminded me of, and a little bit with the structure and the food thing too. So it's a paradox, which I love. Paradox is my favorite. Things that seem like they don't go together, like the way of no way. That's a perfect example. So embracing that. So as we started this, I picked an essential arts card, and it says steady streaming. So Miche, when you talked about just going with the flow,
Yeah.
that's exactly it. And the structure, like Nancy, like you're talking about, the structure of having your meals can help you with that steady streaming too. And it doesn't mean like clamping down and holding it steady. It's got to be able to have course corrections and, like you said, Miche, you know, going with what speaks to you and
Right. Obviously, I need some structure. You know, I mean, right? Because say like you have water, if it's not in something, you know, it's what is it sort of. So even my stream has some sort of structure. I guess what I realize after saying that is that I don't pay attention to the structure. I don't see the value of the structure. I just, you know, I see it as constrictive, you know. But then like when you say that, Nancy, about, you know, eating and just having that, this is how it is, and it leaves all this openness. Like, okay, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense how they work together in like a synergy.
You know, that idea reminds me of back when I was more of a vegetarian. I'd go to restaurants, you know, and one of the nice things about being vegetarian was, you know, there's a much smaller section of the menu that you can choose from. And instead of that being like limiting, it was like, you know, I don't have to worry about all, you know, 90% of the menu. I just, you know, need to figure out, you know, out of the 10% that's left, you know, what can I choose from? Because I think we can get like really, I know I can get overwhelmed by, you know, Baskin and Robbins 31 flavors. Oh my gosh, which one am I gonna, you know? You know, it's just, and then it's awesome that there's so much choice, but it's like, you know, what's the mechanism that you use in order to filter down to the one that you have? Because if you get 31 flavors, you're gonna have a freaking big ice cream cone, you know?
Well, I don't remember the guy's name, but he wrote a book about how society, Western society, I don't know, is really not as happy, less happy than they used to be, because we have too many choices. Like the more choices we have, the more unhappiness we experience.
Right.
And
well, I think that our education and our self-development needs to catch up with that, because having old ways of thinking and then more and more and more choices, right, that's not really going to get us anywhere. But if we can become more skilled at evaluating and discerning and choosing by developing our intuition and creativity, all the things that we try to help folks with, then it's less like a quantity, like you're saying, the 31 flavors, Steve. It's not so much that it's the number of choices. It's clearer to feel, you know, this feels right in my body, or this one really calls to me, or, you know, I feel like I'm being led to that, or this supports my purpose. Like, this manifests the intention that I've devoted to. It's a different way of looking at it, because we can't rationally figure out the best choice in every situation. There are too many variables for our little minds to be able to actually calculate and compute everything. And that seems like it's what a lot of people are trying to do.
Yeah. Well, it's super easy to get caught up in, you know, overanalyzing things. And especially, you know, my background in corporate accounting and programming and so forth. I mean, I can analyze things to the nth degree, and I mean, I've got the technology to do it, but it doesn't necessarily serve me. You know, a lot of times it's like, you know, what is it? The heuristics, is that the right word? The heuristics. Anyway, it's kind of like your decision factors that you use in order to determine which route you're going to go. You know, do I go with this or do I go with that? You know, do I like strawberry or do I like, you know, pineapple or, you know, whatever. It's like, you know what? And so it's kind of learning to listen to the cues that you've got. And having structure actually really supports that. You know, I mean, it's much easier for me at least, be curious what you guys think, but, you know, if I have a structured way of making decisions, you know, it reduces my anxiety about making that decision, you know, whereas it's just, you know, it's everything under the sun. Maybe that's why I don't like shopping, you know, because it's, you know, you go into a mall, it's like, for me, it's just overwhelming. You know, all these different stores and all these different possibilities, and, you know, and all these people and everything. And I just feel like I'm I don't know, I feel kind of claustrophobic in that environment. But, you know, whereas if I know exactly where I'm going and what I'm getting, you know, it's not a big deal. I can just go in and get it and get out, and be done with it.
I love shopping, Steve. And one time after my dad died, I was just 24 and I inherited what seemed like a boatload of money to me at the time. And I went to the mall with my sister, and I was like, I could buy just about anything in this mall. And I came out empty-handed.
Oh.
And in tears, because I felt just overwhelmed with the choices. You're right, it can be all good things, all good flavors, but how do you know, and it made me think about your graphic earlier about the what are the major pieces, the production, the marketing, and what was the third one?
Management.
So the management of your business. You know, what, like if you have your focus on all these different things, we can basically not get anywhere.
I think that structure can be helpful if it's the right one. So this is maybe a little circular because it's also saying that the structure needs to feel right for each of us at the right time. So if you have the right structure, it's helpful. If you have a structure that doesn't fit you or fit, you know, yourself at the time, then it's not.
Or fit the circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, that's, so the old school way is like saying some external authority has the right answer and the right structure, you have to try to fit into it. And that just seems very old story, where the new story is the paradox of we're creating the structure at the same time we're using it to help us contain ourselves, to be more creative. And now those things can all go together. What fun.
Well, and I'd like to hear us talk a little bit more about creativity, not as the opposite of structure, but in its own right, what does it bring to the table?
You know, I think honestly, creativity and structure go really well together. You know, you look at, I don't know, I'm looking at your guys' backgrounds and even my background. We all have some kind of art behind us, you know, and there is structure in which that creativity resides, right? And so, you know, the photograph that you have behind you, Nancy, you know, has limits, if you will, you know, in width and height, you know, and you know, what can you create within that space? You know, I've got you know, this print of this French cafe, you know, behind me that, you know, again has width and height to it, you know, and you know, how do you create within that space? And you know, I think having the structure, the canvas, if you will, of to work on, what can you do within that space? You know, it's kind of like the mall analogy, you know, in that, you know, if you know what you're going for, if you know what you're trying to create, what the intent is, you know, it just makes it much easier to fill up that space and to create something that works. But to have freedom with it too, right?
Well, I want to mention too, I recently did a vision board workshop for 2018, and it was the two youngest people that were in their 20s in the workshop that did a vision board in creative ways that I'd never seen. One of them took all these pictures, but created a mountainscape with photographs that were cut so that they became the mountain, right? But they were different. And then she created this path, and she said all the words that she cut out were going to go along the path because that was her path, you know. Wow. And I loved it. And then this other young woman came in to see me yesterday for a counseling appointment. She'd also been to the workshop, and she hadn't finished her vision board. So she brought in the finished vision board, and it had like this almost like peacock spread off of one corner. And then the pictures came down in another part of the frame with something off of three sides of the poster board, you know, like they were extending outside of the boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And she had plenty of space still on the board. It wasn't like I can't fit it and so I'm going to extend it. It's kind of my thing. But I loved how really different they were. And it did strike me that they were both the youngest people. So I think they're learning a more creative way of approaching what might be not a problem, but an exercise.
Yeah. That's exciting.
So did having a canvas and a size help them go beyond the canvas? Or was it, the canvas sort of limiting it and yet they still stretched beyond that?
Right. Well, you just reminded me of something I used to say when I taught yoga classes. I didn't want people going outside of their comfort zone, but I wanted them to stretch to extend what their comfort zone included.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. When I do the meditations on Tuesday night that I lead, I guess I have a basic framework. I mean, really loose, like, you start by just showing up and being present and breathing, and then after that, I'm never really sure what comes up. I mean, it's, I'm in the direction of opening your heart and feeling, the energetic and loving vibes. Okay. But within that, it's just open. And that, to me, that's part of my creativity, to be spontaneous and to allow, again, it's like the flow in the stream. Sometimes it feels like, depending on who shows up that night to that group, that's what comes out. It's like, whether it's like spirit coming through me or my intuition interacting or, I guess I see it as a more spiritual, higher mind, or, like we're all connected sort of thing. So that when I show up without too many preconceived notions or determined, path, then I can go anywhere, and to trust that wherever that anywhere is fine. Or more than fine. It's good. It's right. It's, it's not meant to be in a fated sort of way, but it's sort of a natural outcome, I guess, of whatever the combination is of people and energy and thing at that moment.
I think that's a great expression. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great gift to be able to facilitate like that too. That's awesome.
I think it's really neat to watch how things unfold. It's, I think, having the structure, the canvas, and that canvas can be, your life, the day, the week, the month, the year, whatever. It can be, a building. It can be, an actual literal canvas. It can be, the jewelry that you work with, Miche, or, all these different ways that we can express, and, just to see what shows up in that space, when we allow ourselves to, because there is like the things that we know, the experiences that we've had, the education that we've had, the training that we've had, whatever, that has a tendency to show up, but it shows up oftentimes in unexpected ways. And I think that's like really where the really creative stuff happens is, when you take everything that you already have and then something new shows up, something shows up in a way that you've never seen it before.
Right, and that happens, that's kind of like that reverse engineering thing too, or reverse structuring, where you do something spontaneous and a pattern emerges from it, or a structure emerges from it. Like, Miche, just to make up something up, your example, maybe every Tuesday night you notice that, a certain thing happens and that this becomes a pattern, and even though you didn't plan it, it keeps coming up. So that's fun to see too, when you let things flow creatively, and then the pattern emerges and that becomes your structure. And so you don't have to be confined by it. You can still play with it and be done with it when it's done. But sometimes you realize it's not as completely loose and random as maybe you thought it was to begin with.
One of the things I really appreciate from our conversation earlier today was this idea that all of the undone projects have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're all feeding this greater ocean of possibilities.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting to watch things again, how they appear. You know, and I think I know I do, get caught up in, as we were talking earlier about, completion and, finishing projects and so forth, that if we get too caught up in that kind of artificial expectation, that we sometimes ruin what could otherwise show up, and rather than when we
certainly we discount that a lot. I mean, it ruin what could show up, but all the things that you've learned and done, myself included, and then jack of all trade, master of none. That just sort of says like, hey, whatever you learned, if you didn't go master it and become an expert, well, you just basically wasted your time, and you have nothing to share either, right? So I finally changed it to jack of all trades and master of some. So
nice, yeah.
I have what I have, and some things I'm stronger in than others.
Right.
But we disqualify ourselves or disqualify what we've gained or learned by thinking that there was a finish line that we didn't get to.
Right. And sometimes that mastery is the mixture of those things that, that
totally,
accounting and art, who would have thought,
It's like your favorite 3 flavors out of those 31.
Right. Yeah, what's a mixture? Yeah.
I know several people who are also, fiber artists or like to sew. And and so we decided to get together and have a group called the UFO group, the Unfinished Objects, and just all bring our projects.
Nice.
So it's funny, we have never gotten it together, but we all love the idea. And another one is the LMNOP project group, the Little Mending Needed On projects. Someday we're going to get together and do this. So even our UFO group is unfinished. It's even unstarted, I guess, but it's like a way of holding the space for the possibility or not. And it's just recognizing with each other non-judgmentally, like, oh, I have a basket full of those projects too.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
And maybe that's
go ahead.
I'm just thinking that maybe that's a good place to finish our UFO, with our LMNOP. But this has been a really interesting discussion. So